Sunday, 1 hour earlier than usual, and that means that I, for once, forgot that we were streaming an hour earlier. So things happen pretty fast in my household. And if you look down here, Tobias isn't even at home. So we're good. Welcome to the European Ham Radio Show. A little bit. Let's see. How should I put this? Things kind of spun out of control because we were supposed to have Chris, Mike Zero CVO on from radiostuff.com to talk about his antennas. But he had some conflicts of interest and some other plans, so he had to cancel. And then I asked other Walt over here if he could come on instead. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to design an antenna and the thought process behind it and how you think when you do that. But first of all, it's our ham radio weeks. Kjetil, would you like to start?
Yeah, funniest or the most exciting ham radio moment for me this week was yesterday, testing that mystery balloon I found in a crate in my shed. And basically just playing around and learning how to use some of the tools I have, because I have lots of fancy electronics tools that I haven't used for a decade and forgotten all about. So learning how to do that and getting some help from some members in the community here was really fun. And then I think we found out it was a useless balloon that we can't use for anything other than a fishing weight or something like that. But anyways, I know what it is now. And I do remember I bought this one the first year I was licensed on, I think it was from Deal Extreme, and I never got a QS on it, ever.
So you're not going to use that balloon again. Do you have any pictures to show?
Yes, I have, but I will have to find them.
And while you...
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking we could bring in Tobias. I've muted Tobias because he's out walking. So, but we can bring him in while you search for your pictures, Kjetil.
Yes, do that.
Yeah,
Tobias.
hi guys. Yeah, it was just too hot in the shack. 8 o'clock, it's still, I think, above 30. So I thought I have to escape here in the woods where it is bearable. So you have to endure me today with a bit of environmental noise.
Yeah, we will. No problem at all. How has your ham radio week been, Tobias?
Not very well. I had some bit of escalation at the day job, so long hours, so zero spare time basically, and zero ham radio. That happens as well.
That happens to us as well sometimes. So nothing exciting to write home about this week then, Tobias?
No, I'm just still having fun testing out this gimbal. So it has basically 3 modes. You can put your big camera on, well, big in quotes, my Micro Four Thirds camera. You can put an action cam on, and you can also put a smartphone on. So, and this is at the moment with the iPhone. So having fun playing with this and learning about it. But as far as I can see, it works pretty well. So this is all. Well, I don't know if there's any stabilization inside the iPhone, probably. But this is me walking about, and I think the video is not too bad.
There's a bit of
Apart
you're a
from
little
the
bit grainy.
which is light is fading a bit.
Yeah, you're a little bit grainy, and I guess you don't have the best cell phone coverage in the world because there's a little bit of latency on you.
Tobias is
Yeah,
sponsored
there's
by
a little
Real
bit of
Player
forest
this week.
around me as well, if you can see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Kjetil, you got some pictures, so I'm going to put those up here.
Yep. Tobias is sponsored by Real Player this week, for those who remember that reference. Yeah, it was really good earlier today. So
you need to. We have some younger viewers, Kjetil. You need to explain why that joke is funny.
Real Player was a really early video streaming service made for like 33.6K modems and stuff like that. So you streamed in 128K or 256K resolution. If you were lucky, you got 5 frames per second and you saw all of the pixels.
Good summary.
So basic for testing, it's a mystery balloon. If you buy a balloon on eBay or on Amazon or AliExpress or whatever from China, it's a big chance it looks something like this. It's white, and mine has no markings on it, absolutely nothing. So high quality stuff, of course. And so got some help on what to measure. So I measured across the terminals on this end, 0.6 ohms, same every direction. I measured this one, it was 0.621 ohm. So it was dead short in every direction. So that like made me wonder a bit. So I did a bit of testing with the nano DNA, found out that it's pretty much the resonant at 1 megahertz if you're testing it with a 50 ohm load across it. So just with a resistor over here, 40 watt resistor, 50 ohms or 47. At this time, I had messed up calibration of the nano VNA because I didn't know how to do that. So I had to Google that. Lots of learning because it measured my perfectly good dummy load at the 12 to 1 SWR. So I thought I had a feeling something was wrong. So after a while, Nixie tubes. I got out all of my different test equipment, more than I needed, but this was in here because it has Nixie tubes, so it's cool. But basically, I have an old signal generator here, and from what I could understand, you send a relatively low frequency signal through this and send it to the scope, and you can measure out the difference in voltage. And found out a few things. For example, if you send this in the low kilohertz range, it doesn't have enough power to actually push through that transformer. So that's why I got some really weird readings at low frequencies. So I had to go up to a few hundred kilohertz, and then it gave some reasonable measurements out. And also it's off by a tiny bit, but not too much to be a 40-year-old device. So that's fun learning for somebody who has no idea how to do things like this.
I need to dive into that space because I have a signal generator here and a scope, but I don't know how they work and what to do with them. So I need to start diving into that space.
Yeah,
we should do a measuring type, maybe an episode or a series where we do things like that. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yep, that would definitely be fun.
For example, understanding what this means, like what does it mean, or frequency, I guess most people know, but like the basic measuring functions of a digital scope, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I have what is probably a 40-year-old Kenwood scope here, but I have no idea how to use that.
Yeah, no, I have an analog one as well, but that's mostly because it looks cool.
Yeah, I got it because it looks cool on the bench.
Yeah. And you have a big bench.
Let's see, Sean. I have such a big bench. It's about this big, and actually I can't. It's about this big.
Doesn't work when you cut your arms off.
It doesn't.
I was listening to our friends at the ham radio workbench, and I think I forget his name, but he has what he's calling a Murphy bench.
Yeah, Thomas K4S.
Thomas, of course. Sounds like a good idea. Maybe you could create a Murphy bench right next to.
I definitely need some more space. So, but my kids aren't old enough to the point where I can throw them out of the household yet. So I got to live with this for a little bit longer. And it looks like we lost Tobias here, so he'll probably be back. Sean, what's your ham radio moment of the week?
Well, first off, this portion of the episode is sponsored by Winamp with a crystal clear audio. It really rips the llamas. I had to. If you guys remember a real player, you'll remember Winamp.
Yeah,
of course.
But with that, and for real, the bands have been kind of in the dump the last week or so. And I got my Flex radio back up, so I'm just like, is it broke? Is it broke? But the most exciting thing about this week, I've been doing like a lot of designing and stuff until we had multiple power outages. And it really goes to show how great it is to have backup batteries and how amazing it is to operate when the whole like neighborhood is out of power because your noise level is so quiet. But of course, again, the bands were dead, so it was kind of ineffective. So then again, it really did also reassure the fact that I really like my Flex radio. However, it's really great to have my backup 991 here, VHF, UHF, in case there is anything local that I need to transmit or whatever. And then HF, of course. So I got to play around with that quite a bit. And then I said, like a lot of designing, kind of, wire insulators. Also for linked dipole, this is threaded right here. So you could actually have like a post here and you could link or unlink it really quick. Just stuff like that. Just playing around.
Yeah, that's what
and printing
ham
with
radio is all
nylon.
about.
Yeah, and printing with nylon too to see how weak 3D printing is and how it's so ineffective.
Careful now. You know,
Wait. Was that regarding the comment on the video on my video on your antenna, Sean?
No, I was doing this beforehand. I love how funny enough, it wasn't, but I just love how flexible the filaments can be and become, and so I was playing around with that. And is this a better solution for an insulator? Because even though it is flexible, that flexibility is probably good because you don't want an insulator to snap over time. And so, that's all that was.
Yeah, that nylon thing, it's like you probably won't be able to rip that in parts or in two. It's so insanely strong.
Yeah, I know.
And for the people that are listening to the podcast, Sean is trying to rip 3D printed nylon part apart, but he can't do it.
Yeah, and basically, I'll describe this to anybody who's listening at home just real quick. And basically, it's just an S shape. And each of the S shapes, when it hits the peak of the S, or the bottom peak, if you will call it that, basically at that point is where the wire is going to sit on each side. So you could have two wires connected, and then in the middle there's just a small hole where you could put a post through and have an alligator clip or ring terminals to place on the wire to that post or take it off to connect or disconnect a linked dipole, for example. And what I'm trying to just show off here, and probably didn't do a good job explaining it, but nylon is very flexible material. So that's all I got for you.
Yeah, that's more than enough. Bob, you got a new radio? Anything else this week?
Yeah, I'm kitting out the new car for HF and VHF, UHF. So I got a new radio. There's a 7300 standing on my desk. I haven't turned it on yet because it's for using in the car. And there's all sorts of other tasks to do before then. I'll talk about that another time when I actually do it, not when I'm just planning it like I am today. I figured I'd share no, that's not the one. I'll share a picture of the schematic of the balun that Kjetil spoke about. Let's see. This is what we think is inside of that balun. Which explains why you get 0.1 ohm between every single combination of test points. And what that does is it converts a balanced line to an unbalanced line to a balanced line, or vice versa. So this is what we think you have, and it at least it explains all the readings. So
a 1.1 voltage balun.
A 1-to-1 voltage balun, yes. It's not going to do any good stopping common mode currents. So you need a common mode choke in addition to that. And a common mode choke will normally also do the balanced to unbalanced for you. So it's basically not really a very useful thing to have.
No, but then again, it was probably cheap.
No, I bought it on Deal Extreme.
Yeah, since we're talking about Real Player and Winamp, we can also talk about Deal Extreme, and that was buying from China before anyone else bought stuff from China.
Yeah. It was like AliExpress of the early 2000s.
Yep.
I had, I think, basically at least one small envelope coming in from there every day.
Same here.
So, great fun.
I did actually find
Go ahead, Kjetil.
I did actually find a place that sells reasonably priced leather lines since we discussed that. So you can get them down to €2 or 20 kroner in Norway.
Is this the unmentionable place?
No. It's Tom's place, Pneuma Beam.
Ah,
Yeah.
all right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good to know. Me and Kjetil spoke about creating a a slim jim for 80 meters.
Yes.
For those that doesn't know, that's an antenna that's about 60 meters long. And we talked about different ways to deploy it, and agreed that if you found a sufficiently tall bridge, we could deploy it upside down. And so there's been some chat about that.
But the Svinesund Bridge, the border bridge here between Norway and Sweden, that's only 59.4 meters high. So 80 meters is out of the question there.
No, we'll use the DX commander to raise the feed point.
Sounds really good. But if we're doing it inverted, then we have to send a USB instead of LSB, right? On 80.
No, you just have to start half a period later. So when you press the PTT button, you have to wait half a period before you start talking, and then it's going to be all right. So, yeah. It's not. I'm just joking. Other radio things. We lost the other Walt here, but he's probably going to find his way back. I went up into the mountains. I drove for some 400 kilometers, I think, up into the mountains, and I biked another 10 kilometers to a cabin in the mountains, and discovered that no, I was really not in shape for that climb. This was on Friday. I was meant to go with some colleagues up to my summit, more than 2,000 meters above sea level. But I had to cancel that because I really wasn't in shape for it. So in the rain and the headwinds, I had to cycle back for another 10 kilometers and then drive back another 400 kilometers. This was, of course, Friday evening. So, a lot of driving, a lot of cycling, and very, very little summits on the air. So yesterday I did basically nothing, and today I thought I need to get out. So I did 2 all-time new one parks, and that was fun. Did one on sideband and one on digital. I was planning. I started on 20. I was thinking, let's see if I can manage to get the full 10 in this park. So I did 20, 17, 15, 12, 10, and 6. And I'm thinking, all right, this is really going places. So I did 30 and 40. And with that, I think I'm up to 8. So I was thinking, all right, if I can do 60 and 80 now, I'm gonna fill out the card for this park. And 60, 80, and 160 was, of course, completely quiet. So I will have to come back in the evening time, or I will have to get some contacts on VHF, UHF.
I noticed that on my Stalker app when I was driving to my POTA today, that you were switching bands like crazy. What antenna did you use for that?
That was it's the same 10-meter tall wire with the small radial net, and I used the AH4, is called, the tuner for the 705. That just tunes anything, so I'll just connect that to that wire. It's the one I use for my small matchbox when I don't bring a tuner. It's the exact same wire and the exact same radial net. So
nice.
Yeah, that's a fun award to work for, though. The 10. With the 10 bands, it's surprisingly challenging.
Yeah, I remember I challenged you to do it, and I forgot. So, and you didn't. So you won that challenge quite easily. But I figured it's about time I try to catch up. So I'll try and do that with more parks, because it is fun to see what you can do, especially when 6 meters is open as well. It should be possible to do that on only HF, I think. So.
Yeah. I guess that brings us on to my ham radio week, which has been pretty much not that exciting. I've been working on a project at work, which is kind of ham radio related, because I work at a travel agency, and I'm looking into the possibility of arranging some kind of group travel to ham radio in Friedrichshafen next year. So I'm looking into the options there. I can't really talk more about that. Besides that, I started out yesterday, was doing the dishes, looked out the kitchen window, and saw that my NFET half wave was not looking the way it was supposed to. So I went out and it was kind of loose, but I figured, okay, I've been thinking about reworking the balun from a 56-1 to a 49-1 for a while. So I brought that inside, reworked that, and decided while I was at it, because I'm struggling to keep the higher bands, get them low enough to be in resonance. So I've been playing with 3D printed coils here. So the large one here is an 8-turn coil, 25 millimeter, which I'm going to deploy later on to see if that brings the higher bands down to at least in band or somewhere near band. And I went out to just check on the line and the wire in the forest today, and it turned out that the reason my antenna was not hanging the way it was supposed to was because there had been a tree that has blown over and snapped on top of the paracord I used to tie the antenna off with, but nothing had broken. So that's pretty much my ham radio week. Nothing else, actually.
That's still plenty. It gets a little frustrating sometimes when those things happen, but they do happen, right?
They do happen, and you need to take care of them. And that's the reason why I haven't made a video this weekend. So I'm not sure if and when there's going to be a video next week. But depending on if I get that NFET halfway from radio stuff up in resonance, I'm probably going to do a video on that. But I want to have it working as well as it's supposed to. Yeah, and besides that, me and you, Sean, has talked about remoting into each other's flex radios and looking into legislation along that subject. Turns out that since you're not an extra, you cannot remote into my radio. But it turns out, as far as I can understand American law, and this is not legal advice by any means, I am allowed to remote into your flex radio, as far as I can understand.
That's right. And I've actually been hoping to do a stream where basically I invite technicians to come onto the stream and be able to operate my radio, because they're still under my control. I can kick them off the stream, but also I still have control of my radio too. So it's a way to get techs around the world that I might not get to interact with in person and show them parks in the air to get on the air and do a general portion band while being Elmered as well. So, I mean, that kind of all works out just along the same line too, Morten. And I guess one of the things that we could consider in this case too, I don't know anything about Norway except they have green license plates, but some of them. But basically what I was thinking was, I wonder if I can't operate under your supervision with your call sign. It won't be mine, but I'll still get to operate under your call sign.
I think that's in best case in a gray area.
No,
Interesting.
You can do that with a club call, Morten.
You can do that with a club call, but it's got to be for education or recruiting purposes, I think the law says.
You're all trying to recruit me to Norway.
And where?
If this is not recruitation, I don't know what. This is doing. No. Honestly, this is doing something to make people excited about amateur radio.
Yep.
It's obviously recruitment aid, so that should not be a problem.
But those are one of those cases where it probably, and this is one of those places where it'd probably be good to have everything in order and squared off before you do it on YouTube.
Yeah, especially since like the NCOM people watch YouTube.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do, but it's really stupid to leave the evidence out there.
Yeah, but I agree. I had a bit of chat of that at your ham meeting as well about that specific rule, and it's supposed to be like something that's pre-planned during like ham radio training or a scout event or school event or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that's a rather flexible rule. Especially how it's written down.
Yeah, it is really flexible. I can take my kids and let them operate my radio under that rule.
Yeah.
As long as it's for training or recruitment purposes, and I can say that, well, I want to get my kids licensed.
Yeah, I don't think there's any I mean, again, you got to do your due diligence and research, but I don't think there's any harm in saying it is educational when I'm having the opportunity, for example, to operate in a foreign country before I visit the foreign country, so I know when I get there how to operate after I get my extra. See, we already learned that. That was already educational.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you need your extra. Then, as far as I can understand, you are allowed to remote into my radio. And Jürgen, OH4. What's this called now? I had a brain.
AHW.
Yeah, Jay. Yeah, he's got a US call sign, so he's actually allowed to remote into your radio.
See,
Sean.
I could see this being a really fun stream where basically all you guys are remoting into the radio, making contacts with the people from the States who watch you all the time, or whoever,
And I mean, just experiencing how propagation is different in different parts of the world.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Really understanding that too, because when you have a maximum usable frequency here, as we talked about this morning a little bit, it might not be the same as in France or in Norway. The maximum usable frequency is going to depend on a number of factors depending on where you're at, and you'll notice these trends about how propagation seems to go the same way on certain times and certain days of the year, right?
Yep. And
But
you brought
this
up
is,
the muff charge here, Kjetil.
Yeah, this is the muff map I like to use. And it has pretty much the same data as all of the others, but this is just pretty simple. I have no idea where I found it, but it works.
That's my favorite one.
Can you send me the link for that, where you find that, Kjetil, and I'll put them in the show notes on the website?
Absolutely.
EU.
And then also, for example, looking at the ionosonde, these ones, these datagrams, that's also a really fun thing to do. And this is like the basics behind this data. This is slightly off topic, sadly, but it's ham radio related at least. But this is basically the data behind these maps. Different measuring points where they're measuring the muff or maximum usable frequency at different locations. So we have one.
I consider myself a fairly smart guy, but when I see that chart that you just showed us, I just want to cry.
No, it's very simple. You look at this part on the bottom here, and we ignore all of the complicated stuff up here.
All right. Yeah, maybe you can do a presentation on that on another. That would be fun. A proper presentation on propagation issues.
Let's have that from somebody who knows what they're talking about. But
that would probably be smart. And speaking about knowing what we're talking about, we're going to talk about antenna design today. And let's see if Tobias is among.
For anyone wondering, that's not when I'm just pressing the button at the same time. So
I think he just has that video on loop. It's just the same video that's been playing over and over.
It's really calming though, watching the German forest there.
It is.
So you're back among us, Tobias, and you're muted again though. So and I can't unmute you because you muted yourself.
Yeah. Are you in a POTA, Tobias?
Yeah, actually I am. I just didn't bring a radio. That is the problem.
Make sure to log all of the call signs you find in the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about antenna design today, and I was thinking we're not going to do the complicated stuff about modeling and stuff, but how do we come up with these halfway bunkers idea, like making a Moxon from a lawn chair or something like that? And Sean, speaking about Moxons from lawn chairs, you got one behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about that antenna?
Yeah, and to be honest, here's how I'm going to just give a brief rundown about how this whole came up and how I did this or whatever. Everything comes from inspiration, and I was reading an ARRL magazine article, I think it was. Additionally, maybe one of these books or the ARRL antenna book, and they talked about it. The dimensions for a Moxon. Actually, it might have even been online, right? But they were talking about the dimensions from a Moxon. I did a little research for 2 meters, found some stuff online which gave better dimensions, and I got really excited. So it was in my mind at that point. I went around Goodwill, thrift stores, basically secondhand stores, and I found a really nice old like a lawn chair or a camping chair. And we just kind of started hacking it away to see how we can get the dimensions and how we could piece it together. And it kind of came along, and then all of a sudden you're talking to yourself, well, how am I going to get the metal to attach to this piece of PVC? And basically at that point, it was basically just designing these old small spacers. And now, if any of you old timers are out there, or the original guys are out there, basically you might even recognize these spacers as something that you might see on a high gain Yagi, because the inspiration came from a high gain Yagi at that point too. So basically every step forward is a little bit of inspiration. Is this perfect? Absolutely not. Does it work? Yeah. And does it give me more ideas for the next time? So basically what I'm saying is I get a thought in my mind of, oh, that looks like a cool antenna to build. And then I let it kind of sit in my head for a few days. And then my mind starts going nuts with ideas. And I see one thing and I'm like, that will be perfect for a lawn chair antenna, if you will. And so, I mean, in a brief rundown, that's it. But I mean, you're looking at the PVC, you're looking at the lawn chair. I think this was probably, I can't remember how much it was. Was it like $3 or something like that? Is roughly the investment in there. And since then, I've upgraded the coax cable on there as well. So the Times Technology coax cable is probably worth more than the whole antenna.
But I mean, that's some important points you bring up, though, Sean, because I know I am, at least when I walk through a hardware store or a furniture store or a grocery store, I usually have that thought of, will that work as an antenna, or is there anything in the store I can make an antenna from? That thought is usually somewhere in the back of my head.
And I think that that's a great point, because that's exactly it. You know, a lot of times are all the metals that we run into going to be the most ideal metals to use? No, but that design and that shape of that item, like a basketball hoop, man, I want to make a 2-meter loop out of a basketball hoop so bad. You know what I mean? Like, you start to think about those things. And if your mind is becoming engaged, like the next step is just kind of, for example, maybe even at that point, drawing out how you think it's going to work. You know what I mean? And then working on part by part, or however you want to do it. Take a trip to your like you say, your local furniture store, or your local hardware store even. I find that I can spend 2 hours in my local Ace Hardware, which is a local hardware store here in the U.S., and I could just be like kind of walking around all the screws and bolts and hardware section. They'll be like 4 times, do you need help? Do you need help? No, I'm just trying to get an idea. You know what I mean? But I mean, like, think about this, and I don't want to take up the whole, episode here, but let's think about this. Let's say you're a new radio operator, you're new to building antennas. I'm not a pro, by the way. I'm not an expert. I'm not a pro. I love engineering things. And maybe you're walking around Home Depot and you see these Carlin junction boxes, which are about $11 US. They're not bad, but inside you could fit a stack TE240, 43, and so forth. And then you pick it up and you start to get really interested, because you know that you could put a dipole in here. You just need a couple of posts to come out one way. And then, of course, you're going to learn how to use a step bit and drill out the spot for the SL239. If you're not that comfortable yet, you drill a small hole with a drill bit and you run coax through there. You'll figure it out, right? You run the coax through there and then attach it to the post. So you're starting to think, okay, I now used hardware from the hardware store. I have this junction box from the hardware store. And you can even get more in depth. And how am I going to mount this onto something? Well, you just screw it in, or let's say you want to mount it to a mast. And what I'm going to do is, let me share my screen here real quick. Now, it wasn't like the first day that I ended up designing an antenna that I was like, oh, cool, these are support block clamps and I need those, right? No, it took some time to realize that I could just design my own support block clamps. And in the meantime, you could find something that looks just like this at the hardware store, maybe like this. Like, let's be realistic, right? Of course, the same size. But basically 2 things to put together. And if you were to bring it onto the side here, you'll see I quickly just mocked up a space for the bolts to go and recess into. And then on the other side, if you look at this width right here, the width is perfectly matched to these. So, it goes on the pole, it goes on here, a couple of bolts, you're now mounted. Okay, so those are things to kind of consider, I suppose. But like I mentioned, maybe you don't have that ability to make support block clamps and design them yourself, you'll get there. It's for me at least, and I can only speak for myself. It's like a step-by-step process, and every project you work on, you could have done better, but you also take everything you learned for the next project, right?
Exactly. And learning is a step-by-step project. And especially for me that don't have an engineering background, antenna building poses a challenge and a way of, I'm not sure if I'm going to use that word, but self-development, learning a thought process along the way.
And like antenna design is special in the hobby here because it's both mechanical and electric design or antenna design. Like you have to know two very different fields of engineering.
Yeah.
And especially if it's something that's out to be there permanently or for a long time. The mechanical design of an antenna that you mount outside, at least in a place with a bit of weather, a bit of rain, storm, snow, maybe salt water, that's going to vary quite a lot. So you got to know what you're doing. But of course, if you're making it in prototyping, it doesn't hurt if it falls down, unless it's kind of big. That's fun, like, because you can nerd really a lot into the mechanical part or into the electrical part here with simulators and all of that fun stuff, but also the mechanical part, you can do so much of optimization that you have to do, or you can do, or you can just build it big enough and it will last forever in any case.
Yeah, and the mechanical part, that's often the thing that separates the hobby-made antennas from the commercially made antennas. I'm not going to say all commercially made antennas, but a lot of them are stronger mechanically because there's nothing magic to an antenna. But the mechanical,
the magic word.
Yeah, like the same way as you're calculating the frequency of an antenna, you can also calculate the frequency of how it moves in the wind and how much that will, or how thick materials you have to have, or how big bolts you have to have. So that's the fun part of building antenna, is the mechanical part, at least from my perspective.
Yep.
So when we do the 80-meter Slim Jim, then you get to calculate the wing loading and the whatever we need to attach it to the bridge and all that, and I'll cut the wires and solder them together.
I'll just do it strong enough for a one-off.
All right, yeah, that's what I usually do.
Leaving it.
But there is going to be some wind resistance to an 80-meter Slim Jim antenna there, Bob.
And that would be the problem with the kite that I would see. I saw earlier in the comments there was a comment about using a kite with an 80-meter ladder line. If you're using a kite, the wind is going to be the unknown variable, if you will, which means if the kite somehow turns like this, your ladder line is going to start to turn, and it's going to affect your impedance and much other things. Your antenna is going to go crazy.
Have you seen a kite-mounted antenna before?
Have I? No, not in person.
Yeah, because you're not using like the string up yourself, like directly as the antenna. You're tying off your antenna halfway or so up, so that that antenna is, or that kite is moving sideways. Doesn't matter that much. You're using it to keep your antenna vertical, which is further down the line.
Oh, so
that's at least one of them.
So the kite is Carlos. No, but you make a lot of sense, and that makes good sense. You're not using the kite. You're not using the ladder line as string. You are hanging the kite separately. That's interesting.
Yeah, but you are kind of then depending on like roughly stable wind conditions, I would guess. I never tried it myself, but I've read a lot about it before, and like there's a minimum wind load, a maximum wind load, and everything around that. But that's like, again, one of the engineering things you have to think about with different antennas. Like none of this is obvious unless you know it.
And go ahead, Bob.
There is a guy on YouTube. I can't remember. I think we might have had him on as a guest, but he's done some experiments with kite antennas. And at one point, the line for the kite snapped, and that thing just disappeared. I don't think he ever found it, and that can be dangerous because if that thing doesn't fall down right away, it's just going to drag both your antenna and the string with it for however many miles, and that can, if that gets into contact with, let's say, power lines, that can become really interesting really fast.
So that's a great point too, and I just want to point out for anybody who's listening or watching that safety is the most important and critical aspect of anything you do with radio or anything in particular, because flying a kite shouldn't get you or anybody else hurt.
No.
No.
So this is the SOTA beams, their setup for this. So basically, this is the kite wire, and the
Genius.
kite going up there, and shock cord here just to take up the slack and make sure that you're not that much affected. And then you have your vertical antenna here. I see this as slightly needlessly uncomplicated when you can just put up a pole there, but just for the fun of it, it would be fun to try one time.
That depends
5/8
how
on
high
80
the
meters.
antenna
That's
is.
a tall pole. That's 5/8 on 80 meters. That's a really tall pole to put up, Kjetil.
Yeah, but that's also like a 120-meter kite. Then you have to have a rather big kite. If you're maybe like the one that some of the windsurfers are doing. And there is a beach near here where I have a lot of people that do windsurfing, where I do POTA. And of course, could probably ask one of those guys. But there's also a part of that beach which is just at the end of the runway at the airport, and there's big signs, "Do not kite here," for some reason.
And I gotta say, I agree with William that those dog screws were brilliant. I think that's a really cool idea. That just if I didn't see that, I never would have considered it. But that makes complete sense.
Yeah,
but it is. I think in my experience, flying kites is kind of limited to the ones you get in the toy stores.
Yeah.
But those are hard to get airborne and hard to control once they're up in the air, and that's an X factor I don't really want to have when playing radio, except for perhaps making good content for YouTube. But it's gonna make it harder. It's not simplified antenna design.
No, but you have to get a proper kite. You can't. It can't be a child's toy. I think SOTA beams do sell a kite specifically for this, which is not a toy. So that's probably going to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, they sell it as an antenna lifting kite. I can show it here as well. I've never oops, wrong button. I've never tested this, and I've never seen it tested, but it looks like something rather fun. So you can see this is a much more advanced kite with some stabilizing vanes in it and so on.
Yeah.
Only ships to the UK, should be able to fly over by itself, but so this one, you can see it's not very expensive, but you have to hook it up to something. But I know that most of the places I activate this would not be an option. The wind is basically not stable enough. Either we have too little, too much, or it's just going in every direction at the same time.
Yeah, that's my exact thought on that.
Yeah, but it's a weird antenna, so it's fun to see. Like you can push your antenna design to this extreme as well.
Yeah. I enjoy what I enjoy is trying to make antennas that shouldn't be portable. Those are the challenges I enjoy. I got a schematic that's about to form in my head now for some kind of delta loop antenna, but I need to work on how to actually get the mechanical parts of it to work.
That's a delta loop for what band?
I'm probably going to start for 20 because that's manageable, and then expand it once I've figured out how to make it as a relatively small antenna.
Because a delta loop, that's typically a full wave loop, yeah?
Yep.
So you're talking about 20 meters of wire that you need
20 meters of wire, and ideally supported on only one mast.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just saw an article today in one of the ARRL's books or online antenna book. and it was a delta loop that was on a mast, just as you're talking about. I don't know, how, but basically the way they had it was like basically almost self-sustaining. So I'll try to find
Yeah.
that article for you.
I got a 6-meter delta loop, which I made from Jonathan M0 JSX. If you've seen his channel on YouTube, he made a delta loop with a 2-meter PVC pipe with a hole drill in it and the wire going through. So you just thread that onto your pole, and you have the bottom of the triangle further down the mast, and that works for a 6-meter antenna. But for a 20-meter antenna, that poses a different set of challenges.
I did a 20 delta loop once on the 12-meter spider beam antenna, and that started bending. That was with soda beams wires. It was really lightweight. The issue there was you're starting to get, how much is that? That's 6.5 meters or something. So you're getting a lot of momentum.
6.7. I just did the calculation. That's
Yeah.
This should be doable, but you need. I think you really need to use guide wires to keep the sides straight, and you need guide wires to keep the mast up in a 90-degree angle. But other than that, I think this should be doable. This would be a fun experiment, Morten.
I have kind of two designs forming in my head. One is with the let's call it the flat side of the triangle at the bottom, where you anchor that with some guy lines and then just supporting the top section. That's the one. The other one is having the upright side going up the mast and then just guying it off at one end.
Because you're getting a lot of wind load that far out, even on a very thin wire.
Oh, definitely. So it's not necessarily an antenna for high wind situations, but it would be fun to see if a delta loop would improve the portable operations, both since they're quieter and since they're, depending on how you deploy them, somewhat directional.
If you put them horizontal, how high do they have to be up above the ground?
At least half a wavelength, I think.
Yeah, so if you have 3 10-meter antennas or masts tied up, then
you need 3 masts, and that's more of a field day antenna more than a PODA antenna.
Yep.
I have 3 masts. We can try this.
Yes.
We can try that. Definitely. Make a full-size 80-meter.
No, because that would have to be 40 meters up. I'm talking about 20 meters now.
It would need to be. It would be NVIS though.
Yeah, then it's an easy problem to solve. That's,
my challenge is, and just hang on one moment, I'm going to show you something.
We're hanging on.
While we wait, so
hang on.
Yep.
Because I have a balun here, which is not exactly small and light, but that's a 4-to-1, and it's a 5 kilowatt balun, and that would be really nice for a loop antenna. But it's not something you hang on top of fiberglass mast.
That depends on the fiberglass mast.
Yeah.
But if that's a 4-to-1, you could probably feed it with 300 ohm ladder line, and you can put the balun at the ground level.
Yeah, and this is just in case you should need 5 kilowatts of portable power.
In case we go to Italy, you mean?
Yeah.
If you do have that ARRL antenna handbook, in chapter 11, there's an article there that's called The Critical Analysis and Practical Deployment of a Delta-Shaped Grounded Half Wavelength Loop. I know it's a great title. But there's some really interesting insight there too.
Yeah, I got the ebook. Not that we need to go into further detail.
Yeah,
on
right.
that.
Right. I'm on the same boat. If I may, I know we're talking about delta loops and stuff too, but if we're talking about like antenna design, and I know there's got to be a lot of people who are newer into the radio aspect of things, maybe wanting to build their first antenna. Now, I'm going to tell you, my first antenna that I built was for CB. It was a dipole, and I didn't even have I didn't even have a choke on it. And I used a Gatorade bottle cap for the center insulators and the end insulators. Okay, so you get the point there. It wasn't necessarily the best thing in the world, right? And I tell you all that, though, because it worked until the neighbors were complaining about all this RF, or, this interference. and that's when you start. I mean, this is me, and I can only speak for me, but that's when I started to like really understand and appreciate like getting to know more. I want to know more. Why does this work, and what do I need to do to make it better, more efficient, and more practical? Get it outdoors and so forth. So basically, if you're into radio, maybe you consider your first antenna as an easy build, something like a dipole or a quarter wave vertical, which is really just a vertical wire and maybe 4 radio wires, right? And then you can continue to work up. So you talk about a delta loop being very directional, and I bet you a delta loop would be great. Maybe even a Moxon would be something you consider as well. A Moxon could be very large though, and I think that would be a cool one to consider how to make it as portable as possible. I think Adam probably did that before.
I remember seeing a video with you, and I think it was Chuck in California with a Moxon on a soda.
It was
where you got great results.
Great results, absolutely. But I wouldn't consider that like a portable walking with antenna in the aspect of it, there was a lot of heavy components. It was multiple things. Great antenna though, absolutely. And I think we were working like with the IC 705, right? And we were talking to France. You know what I mean? I mean, who doesn't talk to France when they're doing parks and summits on the air? But the whole, I think we made like 133 contacts in an hour. The whole band, like wherever we pointed that thing, we were making contact. And so it's a remarkable antenna. Whereas with a dipole, you might get a little directionality, right, but not nearly as much as a Moxon. So I look at it as steps forward. And I also just real quickly want to point out that you don't need to know everything right away in order to get your feet wet and experiment. And you're going to make contacts if you do it at least semi-right, and then you can continue to build off there. Of course, you want to do things right with theory, don't get me wrong. But also, sometimes it's nice just to dive in and learn by, what did Molson used to say? Learn by doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
getting a quick win. It's important.
And don't let perfect stop you, because sometimes good enough is exactly that. It's good enough.
That's absolutely
what
right.
Gets you on the air, and it might not be ideal in any sense of the word, but it gets you on the air and it lets you make contacts, and then you learn a couple of things and you upgrade from there. I think I went through 4 or 5 antennas the first 6 months as a ham at my QTH because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is nice to have references, but sometimes they don't make sense as somebody who's new. So you do just that, right? You get them set up, figure it out.
Yep.
Play around.
I've been speaking to Morten about this quite a bit, because I have some strong opinions about what are good antennas and what are not. But I have to say, I agree with both of you that in IT we have this saying that says that perfect is the enemy of good. And and the same thing goes here. But the thing is, if you're interested in antennas, by all means, start with something simple. It's going to get your feet wet. You're going to get a feeling for how to do it. Don't settle. There's always a better design for any space, any band, any condition. There's always a better, more interesting design. So don't settle on the easy one just because it works, just because it gets you on the air. Continue doing the research and continue building antennas, because it's really fun.
Yeah, and just try stuff. Try the stuff that isn't ideal, but it might work in your use case.
Yeah. That's exactly it right there. And I agree with both of you guys too, but go ahead.
Not all of us have room for full-size 80-meter dipoles at an ideal height at our QTH. That shouldn't stop you from getting on 80 meters and discussing your ailments and your medication and everything.
We're talking a lot about making antennas, but also buying antennas. The first antenna I bought was pretty useless for my use, and I called up a dealer then. I was pretty new for this. This was before the internet was a thing, back in 2016 or something like that.
Back when people used Winamp and Real Player.
Yeah. So at least I didn't know where to go for advice, to be that way. And if you ask in a Facebook group for which antenna should I buy, you'll get a million different answers if only 10 people answer you. I bought an antenna that was completely useless for my portable use. And I'm still using that antenna today at the cabin for something completely different. But still, buying an antenna is not a guarantee that you get a good antenna for your use. Make sure that you get something, and that's why building one, starting with like an insanely simple dipole antenna, which everybody who's a ham operator should be able to make, 2 wires into the back of the radio. That should be quite achievable for everybody, and then you can actually iterate, as you say, to find something that's better for your use, because you're not going to find the perfect one the first time.
You're never going to find
there is no perfect antenna. There's always something more perfect, just right around the corner. So yeah.
Yep.
And antennas are always compromises. If it's either a compromise on efficiency, on portability, on deployment, it's always going to be a compromise. You're never going to get the perfect antenna unless you live on a farm in the Midwest and you have no mountains and room for huge towers.
Yeah, and especially like if you're
unless you're Callum and have an antenna field.
Yeah, but still,
grows them.
The DX Commander is still not the perfect antenna. It's a really great antenna, but it's not the perfect antenna. Even Callum uses separate antennas for receive.
Absolutely, the DX Commander is it's a really good classical example of a compromise antenna, and I think Callum would be the first to admit that. But it is a very nice compromise antenna because it gets you on a lot of bands with very, very little space on the ground. So, yeah.
And the cool thing about him too is he'll tell you that the DX Commander wasn't his idea. He improved on a multi-fan vertical antenna. Or a multi-band vertical antenna. And kind of what I started with this morning was exactly the same thing, or this evening for you all. But basically, like, you look around, you see antennas, you're like, I wonder what I could do with that. I wonder if I could do anything. And you start to experiment, which becomes really good. If any of you do want to get involved in building your own antenna and you want to start with a simple dipole, the United States Marine Corps, they do have a whole antenna field manual, so they have a guide on building antennas and everything you want to know about polarization of antennas, path loss, and so forth. It's the antenna handbook. I posted it in the private chat, but basically there it'll get you started on making your first antenna, and it's really easy to follow. Any military guides are typically fairly easy to understand, so check it out.
Yeah.
That's a really great idea. And if you get a copy of an old ARRL antenna handbook, that's also a good way of starting. Internet, look what people are doing on the internet. Try to copy it. Try to understand why it works. If you like a design, see if you can copy it and figure out how stuff works and work your way from not knowing what you're doing to somewhat knowing what you're doing, and then you're one step up the ladder, and then you're going to continue climbing the ladder and improve on your antenna skills all the time.
Just to be sure, Sean, that was meant for sharing that link, yes?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I'll definitely look into that. That sounds like a nice approach.
It's great. I mean, they talk about everything from like I said, path loss to patterns to ground effect and everything up to VHF as well, maybe even UHF. So it's pretty decent and detailed. But also, there's really easy to understand illustrations. So for a guy like me, sometimes I have a hard time understanding things in this book right here. By the way, I really agree with you. Get yourself an old ARRL handbook. They're at like thrift stores in the U.S. all over the place. But sometimes I can't understand and read like all this stuff and be like, it's a lot to understand. You read this Marine, or even the Army has one too, field manual about these things, and it's like, okay, this is a lot simpler and easier to digest and understand. So maybe it's your stepping stone, right?
Yeah, and these manuals are made for people that don't understand radio in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I also think that a manual like that, an army manual, that would help. I find that a lot of people want to explain things and they use so extremely many words. I get just fed up with reading all these words before they get to the point. And so I really enjoy getting some hands-on explanations of, because anything you can explain in one page in a book, that's probably much better than things that need a chapter. So yeah, looking forward to looking into that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just browsing through that manual now, and I mean that is this is gold. That
like-
manual is gold. It
Yeah.
explains things in such an easy way.
Here, this is public stuff too, so it's okay to
Bob,
share.
make sure that makes it into the show notes. I think that's a great resource for everybody.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Look at this one. It's called the AS. Let me see if I can zoom in for you. I don't know. Yeah, it's called the AS2259GR antenna for an NVIS propagation, 2 megahertz to 30 megahertz. And if we look down, look, it looks really simple to build. You know what I mean? Like I'm not the best reader in the world, but I could look at this. I could see what it is, what it does clearly, like Bob just mentioned. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now I have an idea. And then if you want to get into the technical details, you can too. But basically, they tell you how to build this AS2259, which now I'm kind of wanting to go build right now.
Oh, I can see a whole bunch of YouTube videos coming out now on antenna designs from the military.
That's right, and 1,000 watts, up to 1,000 watts too, which is awesome.
I need to, but then again, have you seen that Spanish YouTuber that only does military radios, Radio Diogenes or something like that?
No.
I'll find the channel and I'll share it in Discord. He's got an extremely huge supply of old military radios, and he explains them. He goes through them. He takes them on SOTAs and POTAs and just demonstrate these military radios.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And when you look at it and you really think about it too, I'm not putting anybody down, and I'm trying to work around my words here, but basically, oftentimes people like me or you may get criticized by really smart engineers, really well-educated engineers. Not all of them, but basically that, you're not doing it right. This isn't the right theory. And you read something like the field manual for the Marines, and it's like, okay, the military had a purpose. Like you mentioned earlier, the military had a purpose. You need to build an antenna that's going to operate for your purpose and for your reason, right?
Yeah.
And if it works for you, great. So showing off that military equipment's awesome. They got some really cool military equipment. I'll check them out.
Yeah, I'll find the link later on and share it. We're a little bit on overtime already because time seems to fly fast when you're just discussing antennas and antenna design. But I guess to sum everything up, though, if you want to start building and designing antennas, just go ahead and start. Is basically what I'm saying here, because start with something simple, figure out why it works, why it doesn't work, and work your way up from there. And don't be
maybe
afraid.
it's repeating myself, but get yourself a nano VNA. That's probably the best $50 you will ever invest.
Oh, definitely.
You're correct. Yeah.
It's a fantastic tool. It's got a steep learning curve, but it's definitely worth it.
They have a class on the YouTube University on how to use that. So
yeah, I think they have classes for pretty much everything on the YouTube University. Thank you guys for watching. I think next week will be an Ask Us Anything episode, if I remember correctly. And Chris from radiostuff.com will come on October 13th. We got him booked for another show. So we'll revisit this, but probably more focused on what commercial antenna maker does. So that's going to be exciting to see. And then again, we're going to be on the Ham Radio Workbench sometime this fall. So we're looking forward to that. By the time of next episode, we've already recorded the show. So I'm so looking forward to that. And I'm kind of starstruck, a little bit starstruck to get asked to be on that show. And on that note, 7-3 guys, and thank you for watching. See you next week.
7-3.
7-3.
Bye.